Thank you, Eric. And thank you all for taking the time to listen to me talk about active demand today. With the CEO chat series, the idea is that hopefully we're going to introduce you to some of the technology that active demand has that you may be using or may not be using, and give you really sort of some context of not just how to use the pieces of the platform, but also why the specific pieces are in active demand and well, why you would be using them. So really, it's a case that's fairly informal, and we'll have a question session at the end. I'm going to share a couple of slides with you to sort of position what it is we're going to do, and then I'll give you some a bit of a demo to show you what the platform's capable of. So today's chat is really on this topic of content moderation, and the challenge that we all face as marketers, and it doesn't matter whether we're marketing for ourselves or we're marketing for others. I think that something that always plays a part in marketing is some type of content. We're producing content, and then the content is going to be disseminated to a population of people with the intent of hopefully making it easier for us to sell our stuff and things. So the challenge we face as marketers is how do we manage a high volume of content, whether it's high volume in a very short period of time or over a period of time. And when we're doing any type of content in marketing, I think that there's always going to be more than one writer, whether we're having writers in-house or we're having subject matter experts that are doing the work, or if we're outsourcing the content to others and then we have to do the editorial. Something that's going to be clear is that one, there is multiple writers. Two is that they'll have different skill sets, not only from the ability to use the language, but two is also how to bring in the domain experience into the content and then keeping it on brand, etc. And as agencies, we end up having more than one client. So how do we manage this and ensure that everything goes as planned and smoothly, etc., and that our goals are being met? And the answer is usually build a process, right? We'll make sure that we have high quality production by building a process. Now, the challenge we face with this is that one is this big word, deadlines. I don't think anybody on the phone here has ever been in a situation where we didn't have deadlines, especially with marketing agencies. It's always, why didn't you do it yesterday? How come it's not done yet? And the second piece is content, and the content pieces always involve people, right? Life is involved in this. It isn't just some type of a machine. There are real, living, breathing people producing the content. And people often get sick. Of course, we can't control that. People are busy, and this is an interesting one. People are confident, right? And I've been doing marketing for 20 years. Why do I have to have somebody else involved in this process? I'm confident that I know what I'm talking about, and what's written is correct. What I've designed is correct. The colors, why am I being involved? Why are we involving other people and process in this? And what ends up really happening here is mistakes, right? I don't think there's anybody on the phone here that hasn't made a content mistake. We've all been there, where we've either sent the wrong content to the wrong people, or gee, that sounded way better in my head than it did on an email sent to 10,000 people. And or on and on and on. So the ramifications are sometimes great, sometimes reputation, sometimes the client ends up firing us, or etc. So the reality is mistakes happen, even if your process is fantastic. So really, I think the solution to all of this is with content moderation process, enforcing it with software. So it isn't just a, yes, we want to do this, it's actually using software to enforce the content moderation process. And that's exactly what we have created in ActiveDEMAND, is we've created this concept of content moderation enforcement. So we've created a system that allows you, the marketer, to ensure that a content moderation process is being followed. The content moderation system is designed to help you as a marketer or as a marketing team ensure or enforce a quality assurance, quality control process. The idea is very simple. The person that creates content cannot publish it. The idea is that if you're creating content, ideally you want somebody else to review the content before it goes live. So the process is a content editor creates content and then he submits the content to moderators. A moderator comes in, approves and or rejects the content, and then the process, if it is rejected, editors go in, fix the problems, submit, the process continues. This diagram here shows you the state changes of the two roles in the content moderation system. One role is the editor, the other role is the moderator. The editor is anybody who submits content for approval. They do not need to be the person who actually creates the content, but anybody that clicks submit for approval, they are now known as the editor of that content. This content then gets viewed by moderators. Anybody that has moderator permissions in the platform will be able to review the content and approve it or reject it. So any piece of content that's in the system, whether it's a blog post, an email, a social post, etc., if you have editor permissions and or if you have moderator permissions, before the content has been submitted for approval, it is in draft mode. So the content editors will see a submit for approval button inside the content. Moderators that have editing permission as well will see a submit for approval button. The person that clicks the submit for approval now becomes the editor of the content. The content moves to the next stage, which is pending approval. The person that clicked the submit button will now see in the editor a retract button. The content itself will be read-only. It will not be able to be changed unless it is moved back into the draft state. So the editor can retract the content, go back and edit the content and resubmit it. The moderator can either reject the content or approve the content. If the content's rejected, it moves back into the draft with revisions requested state. If they approve it, the content moves into the approved state. So in the approved state, it is ready or scheduled for publication. So if you are the editor of the content or in the role of an editor of the content, if you open the content in the platform, you will of course see that it is read-only, that it is in the approved state, and there will be one button which is retract, because maybe the editor sees a mistake. If they retract the content, it goes back to draft. The moderator, if they're looking at the content, they can also go in and reject the content again because maybe there's a issue with the branding, etc., that they find before the content hits the wire. But once the content has actually been published, there is no getting it back, is the reality. So the editor will see a read-only icon, the moderator will see a read-only icon, and the buttons in the editor, there will be no buttons to revoke the content, etc. To enable the content moderation system in the platform, go to Administration, Account Settings. On the Account Setup tab, you will see a content publishing section of the product if your account supports content moderation. And here you can control which types of content will have the approval process applied to it: social posts, email content, blog posts. There is a notification system to help communicate to editors and moderators when content either has comments or is changing states within the platform. You can edit the notification messaging as well as when notifications are sent. There is an email template that you can override in the system if you're an administrator, and you can get full control over the branding over the messaging system. An important part of moderation is the assignment of permissions. One permission that has been added to the system is the permission of content moderator. Any user that has content moderator enabled will be able to approve and reject any content that has been submitted for approval. We've as well added some new user permissions for editors in the platform. you can now assign individual users editing permissions on each campaign type. So anybody that has this enabled here will be able to edit content and submit content for approval in a generic campaign. The same goes for newsletter campaign editing, event campaign editing, etc. Once content moderation has been enabled for your account, you will see a new menu item under Assets called Content. Here you'll be able to review all scheduled content. If you're a moderator, any content that has been submitted for approval will show up here. If you've been creating content or you've submitted content for approval, it will be listed here. So in the campaign view, you will see content, whether it's blog posts, emails, etc. There will be a new set of icons. One icon is this one here. This says this piece of content is currently in draft mode. And if you look here as well on the column, there is now an indication that this piece of content is in draft mode. Now, if I edit the content, and depending on what type of content you have, there will be a new button in the button bar. This button will be Publication. And if you click the button bar, you'll see both the full audit trail of the state changes, who instantiated the state change, the date and time of the state change, etc. As well, there is the ability to make comments on the content. Any moderator or editor can comment on the content, and it will log the comment as the editor of the comment. If the editor of the content feels the content is ready for publication, they click the publication button and click Submit for approval. Now the content from the campaign screen is viewed here. There is a new icon where there used to be a pencil. There is now this little eyeball. The content status change is now pending approval, and if you look here, the icon as well has been changed to this little hourglass saying it is pending approval. I am now logged in as a moderator, and this is the view from the moderator's perspective. In the content section of the product, clicking My Approvals, there is this blog post that Bob, the content editor, has submitted for approval. And as a moderator, I can now go view the content and moderate it. And as you see, the icon here is an eyeball that says that it is in read-only mode, but I can either preview the content by hovering, or I can just click the pencil and go directly to the content to edit it. Now in the content editor as the moderator, you see it is read-only mode. If I click the publication button, I have two buttons. One is approve, the other is reject. I can see the entire audit history as well as the comments, and you can see here the status of the asset right now. So if I reject the content will go back into draft mode. I can edit the content as a moderator if I have edit permissions on it, or if I approve it, the content then goes into the approved state. I'm going to go ahead and approve this content. Back on the campaign screen, we see the content icon has now changed. It is now indicating that the content has been approved. And if you look here, the status has been set to approved. The icon here indicates that the content is in read-only mode. Viewing the content as the moderator, you will see logged in, my role is the moderator for this content. The content is in the approved state. I will see the reject button. So if I find an issue with the content, I still have the option to reject the content. What that will do is bring the content into the state of draft mode. So I'm just going to go in and reject this content. Back on the campaign screen, we can see the content status has changed to draft, revisions requested. And if you look here, the icon has changed. And you see here, there's no longer an eyeball, there's a pencil. This content is editable. I am currently logged in as the person who moderated this piece of content. But because the content is now in draft mode, anybody can go in and edit this content to make changes, even me. So I'm going to go edit this content. Now I can make changes to the content here because I might have found something I didn't like as the moderator, and instead of lengthening the process and going back and forth, etc., I'm just going to make the changes to this content. And I'm going to click the publication button, and you see that my role is moderator, and I'm going to submit it for approval. Now I'm still logged in as that user. The icon is changed. The status is changed. It is now read-only mode. And still logged in as that user, it is definitely read-only mode, but if I click this button, you will see my role has changed for this piece of content. I am now the editor. Anybody that clicks the submit button on a piece of content becomes the editor for that content. Because back to the original statement, the whole moderation process is about the person who is editing the content cannot publish it. Somebody else has to still go in and review my content, somebody else with moderator permissions, and approve this content to ensure it meets the requirements for the account. So that concludes this presentation on content moderation, and hopefully you see the content moderation process enforcement is very easy with ActiveDEMAND. So I'm just going to pass things back over to Eric to answer any questions you may have.